Our viewing audience who tuned in not by chance, we all have a divine appointment. We heard the call and we answered. And our theme for the month has been the dance of life. It's being in a cadence, a rhythm with life, an energy of life. This morning we're going to talk about the dance of aliveness. And I was watching an interview with Joseph Campbell, and Bill Moyers was interviewing him. And he said, well, you know, people, they want meaning in their life. And Joseph Campbell said, I disagree. People want an experience of being alive. When we have an experience of being alive, we create the meaning, the substance, the energy of why we are here. And there's the eternal question, who am I, what am I, where am I going? If we are grounded in our spiritual reality, we have a sense and a knowingness that that one does go before us in every single transaction, transmission of energy, every exchange. That one goes before us and prepares the way. This moves beyond color, race, creed, and sexual orientation. Our God is a God of oneness. When Jesus was walking with his disciples through a field, there was a funeral procession. And someone from the procession said, aren't you going to join in? And Jesus said, no, I'm not. My God is a God of the living, not the dead. So when we get it, that there is one life, that life is God's life, that life is perfect, and that life is our life right here and right now, we tap into a higher spiritual frequency. We move beyond the physical or what we are experiencing at any given moment. We move through that. We come out on the other side. We are all subject to the human condition. You know, I love those little games where they have like the twisted quotes. And one is, if at first you don't succeed, what? No, not try again. If at first you don't succeed, do not take up skydiving. I love these little twisted quotes, right? And if there's a will, I want to be in it. Exactly, right. So energetically, you know, we have a conditioned reflex response by all our little adages and our cliches. But we shift our energy. And we take ourselves out of the law of averages and place ourselves within the law of individual selection. And sometimes it is not easy. Sometimes you have to really look through those appearances, those conditions, and those effects because they seem overwhelming when we're in the middle of it. But step back. The mountain is always clear from the plain, isn't it? Always clear from the plain. So this dance of aliveness, of being thoroughly and completely alive energetically, is being in the rhythm of life. On Spiritual Cinema Circle, there is an interview with Kent Wilburn, and he shared something. He's a writer and an author on Native American history, and he was a struggling artist in his early days, and he said he became a cab driver, not as a career or a profession, but as a job, because he loved to sculpture, and he was a struggling artist. And he was interviewed, and he said one night, he said, I took the dog shift. The dog shift was, you know, the overnight from like 9 to 6 in the morning. And he said one morning he received a call at 2:30, and he said he loved the rhythm of the city at that hour. Everything was so quiet and gentle, and the beauty of the lights. And at 2:30 a.m. he was to pick up a fare. And he said he drove in front of this apartment. It was like a fourplex. It was 2-story. And no one was out there. And he said, being very, very aware of his own aging parents, he thought, well, I'm just going to go up to the door. It doesn't look dangerous to me. I'll go up, I'll ring the doorbell, and I'll just see. So he went up to the door, he rang the doorbell, and he heard this little voice say, just a minute. And he waited, and he said, and this little woman looked like she stepped right out of the 1940s with her little kind of like a little velvet hat with veil and a little feather on it. And she was all dressed up in her heels, and her makeup was on, and her jewelry was impeccable with her little pearls. And she said, "Let me just take one last look." And so she looked back at where she had stayed for several years. And he heard a dragging sound when he heard the "just a minute," and it was her little suitcase. So he said, "I'll take that, ma'am." And she said, "May I hold on to you? I'm not as strong as I used to be." So they walked very gently and quietly down to the cab at 2:30 a.m. She said, "My doctor said I don't have long to live, and that I should check myself into a nursing home. So here's the address of the nursing home, but I would really like to ask a favor of you. Can you take me through the city? There's some things that I would like to see for the very last time." And he said she was glowing and her eyes were glistening. And he said he realized at that moment this was not an ordinary fair, that this was something special, that there was an aliveness about this precious little woman. There was an energy about her, and he turned off his meter, and he said, "I will not charge this woman." And he drove into the city, and she said, "Oh, see that house over there? That's where my husband and I, when we first got married, that's where we lived. That's where we lived." He said, I slowed down so she could get a sense of the very first home that she and her husband had owned, and he'd been gone for several years, and she was quite elderly. And they went through the city, and she said, "See that old furniture store? That used to be the ballroom dance hall, and we would go there, and we would dance, and we would have such a wonderful time when it was the ballroom dance hall." And they went through the city, and she saw other things that she pointed out, and there was a big hotel, and she said, "Oh, that hotel, I used to be the elevator operator in that hotel, and I would meet such interesting people with such interesting stories." And he said, "I thought to myself, like a cab driver. And they went all through it. It took about 2 hours. And finally, they came upon the nursing home. He got out, he got her suitcase, he opened the door, she took his arm, and they walked up to the door. And he said, I just spontaneously hugged her and held her in my arms, because I knew that I was the last person from the outside world that she probably would ever come into contact with again. I knew in the spirit of aliveness that she was going beyond that threshold, never to return. And as I held her, she said, "I want to pay you." And he said, "No, this is a gift for me." And she said, "No, you have to make a living, young man." And he said, "No, there will be other fares, there will be other passengers. No, this is my gift to you." And then she hugged him and held him and said, "You're such a good boy. You are such a good boy." And then the attendants from the nursing home came out, took her luggage and took her in, and she turned one last time and waved and kind of blew him a kiss. And he said, part of him said, "I'll come back and visit," but I knew I wouldn't. I knew that I would go into my next little crises. I'd have other fares, I'd have other passengers. Some would be brandishing guns, some would be drunk, some would be, bereft, some would have something going on, and I knew I really wouldn't. But that moment was alive and teeming with energy. And I was never the same again. It shifted something inside of me. And I went forward into life with that opening of my heart and the energy of realizing that some people think it's such a mean world, and that self-reliance has kind of devolved into a kind of selfishness, where we forget that we're our brothers and sisters' keepers, that we forget about our oneness and our heart connection and the energy that is in that. And as I watched this interview with this amazing man, and he was talking about this is 25 years ago, I remember reading the story on the internet years ago, and that this is on YouTube, and it's had to have over 3 million hits of people experiencing that moment in his life that he wrote about and was so deeply moved that it changed his life. We each have those incidents of aliveness, of someone else is going to go beyond, but there is one life. That life is God's life, and that life is our life now. And when someone at the shore says they're gone, their diminished size is in us, not in them, because they're just as large and beautiful and wonderful as they were when they were at our side. Death is not extinguishing the light, it's turning off the lamp because dawn has come. We believe in our way of life that there is only one life, that we never close a door behind us, that one doesn't open immediately in front of us into a still greater room with greater experience and greater expression. I had somebody call our office and she was crying and her mother had gone into hospice. And she said she used to be so alive and so wonderful. I said, she still is. However, she has immortal longings. And in these immortal longings, there is a greater life that arises out of that. That as we let go of what appears to be this life, that a new door is opening for her. And then she began to share that the person that she spent 40 years ago was on a cruise with another woman, and she began to lament over this. And I said, that's all right. That's his karma. She is preparing for another adventure in life. See her not as a victim of this. See her in her own choices, in her own recognition that it's time to let go and let God do what God does best by means of her and the energy that she shared while she was here. Yes, it's sad at times when these things happen and someone appears not to care, that you're not young and beautiful anymore and I gotta, go on a cruise with somebody that is. And I said, but that has its own karmic implications and has nothing to do with you. But your mother does. So bless her as she prepares to leave. Bless her in the energy of her choice. She has immortal longings. Dr. Ernest Holmes, the founder of our movement, The Science of Mind, said that death is merely an impatient gesture of the soul to rid itself of a body it no longer needs. So when we look at life and death and the dance of aliveness, that while we are here to be here completely and totally, to throw ourselves into it, as Joseph Campbell said, to experience totally and completely the rapture of being alive in all of it, in the distress, in the energy of the tears and the disappointments, the discouragements, the joys, the laughter, the energy that allows us to be all that we can be. And when we allow ourselves to move through these temporal experiences and come out on the other side, we are enriched. We have something to offer one another. We have lives that are lived in. When we look in the mirror, we see a new wrinkle or whatever. Oh, yes, that laugh line, that experience, that joy. We open to the truth that sets us free to be who and what we are, because our God is a God of the living, not the dead. And when we honor that one life, which is God's life, which is our life now, we are lifted on wings of love. This is why I love our way of life. I love the energy of joy, which is the most infallible sign of the presence of God. On Facebook Friday, I proclaimed it, the Global Day of Joy. And I said, just know that your joy, the energy, that no matter what that you are experiencing, that the light of joy absorbs it. Today, let's proclaim a global day of joy. Let's proclaim the energy of light that allows us to feel totally and completely alive, and the opportunity that we have every single day of our lives. This Friday I'm giving a workshop called The Red Shoes, and it's about the red shoes that are magical, and that this poor little orphan girl made a pair of red shoes, handmade shoes that she loved. And then someone in a great carriage came by and said, oh little girl, join me in the carriage. I want to take care of you. I want you to come home with me. And so she went to this great house, and there was this elderly woman, and she had to sit and be quiet. and she bought her a pair of black shoes. And she said, "Where are my little red shoes, my handmade shoes?" "Oh, they were so terrible. We burned everything that you had on, and the red shoes." And something inside of her died as well. That we cannot give away our spirit. That there is a spirit within each of us. And that we look outside of ourselves and we think, "Oh yes, this is good, and that's good," and it's not that they aren't. But when we're out of perspective and we think, "Oh, this is going to do it for me, that's going to do it for me, this other thing outside of me is going to do it for me." No, the spirit of aliveness is within us. When we know that we're alive and well, it's because our intentions, the purity of intention is within us, and we move in that energy. And we allow ourselves to be in the world, but not of it. We allow ourselves to be in the world, to have our experiences, to allow ourselves to open to what's next in our life, and realizing this thing called life is an adventure. It's a glorious adventure. The life that's meant to be lived in. The life that is going to help that elderly person into their next realm and is deepened by it. That will not, he said, "No amount of money could have made me accept that fare. This was as much for me as it was for her." And when we get it, that life presents us with these amazing opportunities for growth, and that we open ourselves to them and we feel totally and completely honored and privileged that we can be in the world but of a higher spiritual value. That we can look past what's being expressed in the outer world. That we can stop taking things personally. And when we stop taking things personally, we really grow. And we truly unfold to the truth of who and what we are. So today is a dance of aliveness. Today is the opportunity to go to the next level. Today is that voice within us that calls to us. It's the clarion call of being all that we can be, and to draw the larger circle when it is appropriate to include what's ever being expressed in that moment. So today, as I greet you, as I acknowledge that we heard the call and that we answered, that we came here today to have our spiritual experience and community, that we are going what? Higher yet. Where are we going? Higher yet. Where? Higher yet. And that makes all the difference. God bless you. I love you, and namaste.